Hello, my name is Mateusz Mazzini and I'm broadcasting for TVP World from arguably the most picturesque location on the European foreign policy calendar, European Forum Alpbach. And my guest now is Carl Bildt, co-chair of the European Council on Foreign Relations. Carl, welcome to TVP World.
Thank you.
And I want to begin with an argument that you presented in your essay a few weeks ago for Foreign Policy magazine when you described possible scenarios for Europe should Russia win the war in Ukraine. And paraphrasing something that you wrote, even if Russia emerges victorious, there should be and there will be no accommodation with Russia the way it would have been a few years ago. So I wanted to follow up on that point and ask you, what would have to happen in Russia for Europe to be able to restore diplomatic and trade relations with Moscow?
Well, I mean, diplomatic relationship we do have, but all the other relationships are, of course, fairly tense. Well, what would happen? What would have to happen? First, we would have to have some sort of peace settlement. Ukraine, as a member of the EU, probably as a member of NATO as well, that is secured. We would have had a Russia that accepts that what it has done was unacceptable, can't be repeated, and a change from the Putin regime, to be quite honest.
And do you think that the recent incursion of the Ukrainian forces into Kursk, into the territory of Russia, does it actually fundamentally change not just the military balance of power, but also the image and perception of the war?
I think it changes more from the political point of view than from the military point of view. I mean, it's 1,000 square kilometers, I understand. That's fairly small if you look at the overall scheme of things in the vast plains of Russia and Ukraine. But the political perception of the war has changed.
In what way would you say?
Well, there was, of course, a fairly significant setback also in political terms for the Ukrainians last year, when there was a much hyped counteroffensive that produced virtually nothing. And then a lot of people tended to say or tend to think and say the Ukrainian can't accomplish very much, and the Russians are going to be week by week, village by village, going to take over Ukraine. And suddenly we have this burst of a Ukrainian offensive, unexpected, successful, showed an ability to sort of offensive operations that changes the perception of the war.
And could Europe still do more politically to support Kiev?
I think politically that's a good question. I don't think we can do very much more politically, but we can certainly do, and we'll have to do more, primarily financially. There's a lot of discussions about providing weapons to Ukraine. Yeah, it's important, but they need money. They need money to finance the soldiers, to finance their defense industry, to finance their production of drones and all of that. And we need to do more there.
And we'll be able to create a united European front. And I'm going to be straightforward with you. I'm asking about the ability of European leaders to contain Viktor Orban and other potential veto players.
Well, so far, I mean, go back, this war has now been going on for quite some time. Did anyone expect European unity to be as solid as it's turned out to be during this period? I'm not quite certain of that. I'm impressed by the fact that we've held up public opinion as well as political leaders as good as we have. Viktor Orban has been contained. I mean, he has a nuisance value, no question about that. But he has not been able to influence overall the strength and the conduct of European policy.
So let's refocus our discussion for a little bit and move to another conflict that emerged in the backyard of European Union. That's obviously the Middle East. Do you think we're putting, as European Union, diplomatically, strategically, enough attention, enough resources to that conflict? Or maybe we even shouldn't?
Well, at the moment we don't have very much leverage at all because we are not united. I mean, this has been quite a shambles if we look at it since October 7th, with different European leaders going off in different directions, and Europe not being able to get some sort of coherent approach to the Middle East at all. And this is in contrast to what happened some years ago. Go back 10, 15 years. We were able to play a role, perhaps not as significant as the Americans, but we did play a role on the Gaza issue, on the West Bank issues, on some of the humanitarian issues in the Middle East.
Now, so what happened in the meantime?
In the meantime, it happened that we were all over the place, that we were not united. And instead of spending time in Brussels trying to really work out common positions, I mean, European leaders was running off in different directions, making statements that made a shambles out of European foreign policy. So it was a big setback. Ukraine, success; Middle East, shambles.
So would you say that in the upcoming term of the new European Commission, obviously the new High Representative for Foreign and Security Policy, shambles could transform into something more efficient?
One would hope. One would hope. One would hope that people will be aware of the fact that it's been shambles in the Middle East, and I think people are certainly aware of the fact that sort of Ukraine is still there, Russia is still there. That particular issue is not going to go away. And we have the big issues coming out of enlargement as well, which affects the entire question of peace and security in the east of Europe and accordingly in all of Europe. So I think it will be, I certainly hope that they will put their heads together and have something.
Would that
more.
actually become one of the priorities, or should it become one of the priorities for the upcoming term in foreign policy for Kaja Kallas?
It has to. It has to. I mean, the word is that we have an ongoing big war in Europe. We have a completely sort of unpredictable and dangerous situation in the Middle East. We have a North Africa that is in a very difficult situation. And we have an agenda of enlargement. That means that these issues they will have to be on the top of everything they do.
But isn't that going to be too much for an institution that hasn't been particularly effective, especially over the few years? Will
Well,
Kaja
it has
Kallas?
been. It has been. I mean, we have been, I think, better than our reputation. And if you look at the entire thing that was managed for sort of the last 20 or 30 years, enlargement, Poland could be taken as one example. That was by no means, if you go back 20 or 25 years in time, that was a rather uncertain issue. So I think we have been successful. We have been managing Ukraine better than most people expected, certainly better than the Russians expected. So, yep, it's going to be a very demanding agenda, but we've done it before.
The reason I'm asking that question is because there is a number of voices across Europe worried about the fact that once Kaja Kallas actually becomes the High Representative for Foreign Security Policy, her focus will be too much on the Eastern Front, Russia and Ukraine, and she will not have enough resources, enough attention, enough leverage in Brussels as well to actually manage Mercosur, relations with North Africa, the Middle East. Is that a real worry?
I think it is. I think it is a concern, absolutely, because we are facing, and China could be added to that particular picture. And you have a situation also where much more attention is given by prime ministers and president to foreign affairs. That's not necessarily bad, but it changes the dynamics inside Brussels. So it's going to be demanding to give attention to all of these issues. But what Kaja Kallas can do, and was done before, is to rely also on the different foreign ministers, to use the different foreign ministers, combination of them, as groups, to be the representative of the European Union, going out in different directions in the world, and helping to do what needs to be done.
And finally, I wanted to ask a question about the elephant in the room of every foreign policy conversation in Europe right now, the US elections.
Yeah, well.
How bad would it be for Europe, really, if Donald Trump returned to power?
Well, as you say, it's a question of how bad it would be, because it would be bad. First, from the overall global point of view, we talked about the rules-based order. The rules-based order would essentially, to a large extent, be gone with Donald Trump. I mean, he will tear up the World Trade Organization, he would tear up the Paris Agreement, he would tear up quite a number of other things. Iran relationships has all been trying to sabotage as much as he could. So it's going to be demanding in the extreme. Then I think he will also, he's not a friend of the European Union, to put it very mildly, or of NATO. He will work with Viktor Orban and a couple of other friends and try to disrupt the European Union as much as he could. So it will be, mildly speaking, demanding.
A lot of open fronts to address and a lot of issues to stay focused on for European foreign policy. Carl Bildt, co-chair, European Council on Foreign Relations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for staying with us here in Alpbach. Stay tuned to TVP World for more broadcast from the Austrian Alps.